Pay attention to this home security footage from a residential neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's 2:47 a.m. You're looking at the exterior of a two-story house. Everything's quiet. The family inside is asleep. Now watch the attic vent on the right side of the house. See that? It just moved slightly. And there, see that shadow behind the slats? Someone is up there. Someone is living in that attic, watching, waiting, moving around while the family below sleeps, completely unaware. That someone is a man who dated the woman living in this house over a decade ago. A man she broke up with and moved on from years ago. A man who never let her go. For weeks, he's been living above her bedroom, altering vents so he can see down into her room, listening to her conversations, watching her sleep, and she has no idea. You know that feeling when you hear a noise in your house at night? That creak that makes you freeze in bed, holding your breath, trying to figure out if it was just the house settling or if someone's there? Now imagine hearing those noises every night for weeks, and imagine learning that someone actually was there. Someone who'd been living in your attic, watching you through altered vents, invading every private moment of your life. That's exactly what happened to Nicole Patterson, a 38-year-old single mother of 5 living in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the fall of 2015. Nicole had built a good life for herself and her kids. She worked as a nurse, owned her own home, was active in her church. She'd been through a difficult divorce, had dated a few people over the years, but mostly focused on raising her children and building a stable life. She felt safe in her home, protected. This was her sanctuary, the place where she and her kids were supposed to be secure from the outside world. But someone had violated that sanctuary in the most horrifying way imaginable. Someone from her past had found a way inside, and he'd been there, hidden in the darkness above her ceiling, for longer than she could bear to think about. This is the story of obsession that lasted over a decade, of a stalker who took the concept of "I can't let you go" to its most nightmarish extreme, and of a mother who discovered that sometimes the person you need to fear most is someone you thought you'd left behind years ago. Let me take you back to 2003 to how Nicole first met Michael Stevens. Nicole was 26 years old, recently divorced from her high school sweetheart, trying to figure out her life as a single mom with 3 young kids. She'd just started working as a nurse at a local hospital and was living in a small apartment, barely making ends meet. Michael was 29, worked in IT, seemed nice enough when they met through mutual friends. He was attentive, charming, said all the right things. Nicole was lonely and appreciating the attention. They started dating casually. At first, everything seemed fine. Michael was good with Nicole's kids. He'd come over for dinner, help with homework, play games with them. Nicole's friends thought he seemed like a decent guy, maybe a bit intense, but nothing alarming. But after about 6 months, Nicole started noticing red flags. Michael was jealous, excessively jealous. If Nicole mentioned a male coworker, Michael would grill her about him. If she went out with girlfriends, Michael would text constantly, wanting to know where she was, who she was with, when she'd be home. He started showing up at her workplace unannounced. He'd drive by her apartment at random times to check on her. When Nicole tried to set boundaries, Michael would get defensive, accuse her of not caring about him, make her feel guilty for wanting space. The relationship that had started sweet quickly became suffocating. Nicole's friends and family started expressing concerns. Her sister pulled her aside one day and said, "There's something off about him. The way he watches you, the way he gets upset when you talk to other people, it's not normal." After about 9 months together, Nicole decided to end it. She told Michael she needed to focus on her kids, that the relationship was moving too fast, that she needed space. She tried to be kind about it, but firm. Michael didn't take it well. He called constantly, sent dozens of texts a day, showed up at her apartment begging for another chance. When Nicole blocked his number, he'd call from different phones. When she threatened to involve the police, he'd back off for a few days, then start up again. This went on for months. Nicole documented everything, saved the messages, kept a log of when he showed up at her apartment or work. She filed for a restraining order in early 2004. The restraining order seemed to work. Michael finally stopped contacting her. Nicole didn't see him around anymore. She changed her phone number, moved to a different apartment, tried to move on with her life. Years passed. Nicole dated other people, had 2 more children with a partner she eventually separated from. She focused on her career, moved up to a better position at the hospital, saved money. In 2010, she bought her first house, a 3-bedroom home in a nice neighborhood in Charlotte. It was her dream come true, a place where she and her 5 kids could finally have stability. Michael Stevens became a distant memory. Just a bad relationship from her 20s that she'd learned from and moved past. She rarely thought about him anymore, but Michael had never stopped thinking about her. What Nicole didn't know was that Michael had been keeping tabs on her all these years. He knew where she worked, knew when she'd bought her house, knew her daily routines. He followed her social media from fake accounts. He drove by her house occasionally, watching from a distance. He was obsessed, had been for over a decade. And in his twisted mind, Nicole was still his. She just didn't know it yet. In September 2015, something shifted in Michael's behavior. Maybe it was seeing photos on Facebook of Nicole looking happy with her kids. Maybe it was learning she'd started casually dating someone new. Whatever triggered it, Michael decided he needed to be closer to Nicole. He needed to be part of her life again, even if she didn't know he was there. One afternoon in mid-September, while Nicole was at work and the kids were at school, Michael broke into her house. He'd been watching long enough to know the family's schedule, to know when the house would be empty. He didn't steal anything, didn't vandalize anything. Instead, he went straight to the attic access panel in the hallway ceiling. Michael was thin, flexible, and had worked in building maintenance at various points in his life. He knew houses, knew how attics were structured, knew how to move around in them without making too much noise. He climbed up into Nicole's attic and looked around. It was unfinished, full of insulation and exposed beams, but it was spacious, and it had small vents that looked down into the rooms below. Michael spent hours up there that first day, making modifications. He widened one of the vents in the ceiling above Nicole's bedroom so he could see down into her room more clearly. He found a spot near the heating unit where he could sit or lie down relatively comfortably. He brought up some supplies, water bottles, snacks, a small flashlight, a blanket, and then he just stayed. For the next 2 weeks, Michael Stevens lived in Nicole Patterson's attic. He'd spend the days when the family was out moving around, stretching, making any adjustments he needed. Once Nicole and the kids came home, he'd stay perfectly still in his hiding spot, listening to their conversations, watching through the vents. At night, after everyone was asleep, he'd move around more freely. He'd use the bathroom in bottles and cups. He'd eat quietly. He'd watch Nicole sleep through the altered vent. It was his own personal nightmare version of intimacy. He convinced himself that by being this close to her, by learning every detail of her daily life, he was connecting with her. That somehow, this would bring them back together. But what was happening in Michael's delusional mind was pure stalking, pure violation. Every moment Nicole thought she had privacy, she didn't. Every time she changed clothes in her bedroom, Michael was watching. Every conversation she had with her kids, he was listening, and she had no idea. Nicole first noticed something was off about a week into Michael's stay in her attic. It started with sounds. At night, after the kids were in bed, Nicole would hear faint creaking noises coming from above. At first, she dismissed it. Old houses make noise, right? Especially in September when temperatures start to drop and materials expand and contract. But the noises kept happening, and they didn't sound random. They sounded like footsteps, like someone slowly walking across the attic floor. Nicole would lie in bed at night, staring at her ceiling, trying to convince herself she was imagining things. But the sounds were too consistent, too deliberate. Something was up there. She mentioned it to her kids one morning at breakfast. "Has anyone else been hearing weird noises at night? Like from the attic?" Her oldest son, Tyler, who was 16, said he'd heard some creaking but figured it was just the house. Her daughter Emma, 14, said she hadn't noticed anything. The younger kids, ages 11, 8, and 6, were oblivious. But Tyler could see his mom was genuinely worried. "You want me to go up and check?" he offered. Nicole hesitated. She didn't want to seem paranoid or scare the kids. "Let's wait and see. Maybe it's just squirrels or something." But as the days went on, the noises got more frequent, and Nicole started noticing other strange things. The attic access panel looked like it had been disturbed. There were smudge marks around the edges, like someone had been pushing it open from above. Nicole definitely hadn't been up there recently, and neither had the kids. Then there were the nails. In her bedroom ceiling, right above her bed, Nicole noticed that some of the nails securing the drywall were protruding slightly, like someone had pushed on them from above. The paint around them was cracked and disturbed, and one morning Nicole found a small piece of insulation on her bedroom floor. Pink fiberglass insulation, the kind you'd find in an attic. How did it get into her room? Nicole's anxiety was building. She wasn't sleeping well. She kept her bedroom door locked at night. She found herself constantly looking up at the ceiling, listening for sounds. Her sister came to visit one evening, and Nicole confided in her. "I know this sounds crazy, but I think there might be someone in my attic." Her sister looked concerned but skeptical. "Nicole, honey, have you been under a lot of stress lately?" "Maybe you should." "I'm not imagining it," Nicole insisted. "Something is wrong. I can feel it." Her sister agreed they should investigate, just to ease Nicole's mind. But by the time they got a ladder and were ready to check the attic, it was late and the kids were home. Nicole didn't want to alarm them if it turned out to be nothing. "Let's do it this weekend," her sister suggested, "when it's light out and you have help." But Nicole couldn't wait that long. The feeling that she was being watched was overwhelming. That night, she barely slept, every creak and groan of the house making her jump. The next day was a Saturday, September 26th, 2015. Nicole's nephew Marcus was over visiting, along with Tyler and her other son Jake, who was 11. The three boys were in the garage working on a school project when Nicole approached them. "Can you guys do me a favor?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "I keep hearing noises from the attic at night. Would you mind going up there and checking it out? I'm probably being paranoid, but I'd feel better knowing what's up there." The boys could tell their mom was seriously worried. Tyler grabbed a flashlight, and Marcus found a baseball bat, just in case. They got the ladder, opened the attic access panel, and Tyler climbed up first. The attic was dark and dusty. Tyler shined his flashlight around, seeing nothing but insulation, beams, and boxes of stored Christmas decorations. "There's nothing up here, Mom," he called down. But then he noticed something that didn't belong. Near the heating unit, there was a blanket, and next to it, several empty water bottles. And was that a box of crackers? "Wait," Tyler said, his voice suddenly tense. "There's stuff up here, like someone's been..." And that's when he saw him. In the far corner, near the heating unit, partially hidden behind some ductwork, was a man. A thin, dirty man with hollow eyes and matted hair, curled up in a makeshift nest of insulation and blankets. The man was asleep, or had been. Tyler's flashlight beam must have disturbed him because his eyes suddenly snapped open. For a split second, Tyler and the man just stared at each other. Then Tyler screamed, "Someone's up here! Mom, there's someone up here!" The man scrambled to his feet, surprisingly agile despite being cramped in that space. Marcus, hearing Tyler's screams, started climbing up the ladder to help. Jake ran to call 911. The man, Michael Stevens, though they didn't know his name yet, realized he was cornered. The access panel was blocked by Tyler and now Marcus climbing up. His only option was to run. Michael ran across the attic beams toward the opposite side of the house. The boys followed him with their flashlight beams, shouting at him to stop. Nicole was downstairs screaming, "Get out of there! Boys, get down!" Michael reached the far end of the attic where there was a small vent to the outside. He kicked it out. It was barely big enough for him to squeeze through, but desperation gave him strength. He squeezed through the opening and dropped about 12 feet to the ground outside, landing hard but managing to run. By the time Tyler and Marcus got down from the attic and outside, Michael was gone. He'd disappeared into the wooded area behind Nicole's neighborhood. Within minutes, Nicole's house was swarming with police officers. The boys were shaken but unhurt. Nicole was in shock, her mind racing through horrifying realizations. Someone had been living in her attic. For how long? Days? Weeks? Had they been watching her? Police immediately began investigating the attic. What they found was disturbing beyond Nicole's worst nightmares. Michael had created a living space in that attic. He'd brought supplies, food, water, basic necessities. He'd used plastic bottles and cups as makeshift toilets, which he'd stored in a corner. The smell up there was terrible once they really started looking around, but the most disturbing discovery was the vent above Nicole's bedroom. Someone had carefully enlarged the vent, removing the grating and cutting away part of the ceiling. From the spot where Michael had been sleeping, he had a direct view down into Nicole's bedroom. He could see her bed, her dresser, most of the room. He'd been watching her, while she slept, while she changed clothes, during her most private moments. One officer found scratch marks on the drywall around the vent, where Michael had worked to widen the opening. There were also marks on the beams showing where he'd set up his observation post. Police photographed everything. They collected DNA evidence, hair samples, fingerprints on the water bottles and food containers. They took the blanket and other items for processing. Nicole stood in her living room hugging herself, trying not to completely break down in front of her kids. "How long?" she kept asking. "How long was he up there?" Based on the amount of supplies and waste, detectives estimated at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. 2 weeks. Someone had been living above her bedroom for 2 weeks. Nicole felt violated in a way she'd never experienced. Her home, her safe space, had been invaded. Every private moment for the past 2 weeks, every conversation, every shower, every night in her bed, had been observed by a stranger hiding in her attic. Except he wasn't a stranger. Not exactly. When detectives ran the fingerprints they'd collected, they got a hit in the system. The prints belonged to Michael Stevens, age 41, who had a restraining order filed against him by Nicole Patterson back in 2004. Nicole's blood ran cold when they told her. Michael, her ex-boyfriend from over a decade ago, the one who'd stalked her before, the one she thought she'd escaped from. He'd never stopped obsessing over her. He'd just been hiding it better. Police immediately put out an alert for Michael Stevens. They checked his last known address. He'd been renting a room in a boarding house about 20 miles away. His landlord confirmed he'd been acting strange lately, leaving at odd hours, sometimes not coming back for days at a time. Michael's car was found abandoned in a parking lot near Nicole's neighborhood. Inside were more supplies, a backpack with food, changes of clothes, tools that could be used for breaking and entering. He'd planned this carefully, but Michael himself was gone. He'd fled into the woods and vanished. The manhunt lasted 3 days. Police searched the wooded areas around Nicole's neighborhood. They staked out places they thought Michael might go. They monitored his bank accounts and phone records. They interviewed his family members and few friends. Nicole and her kids stayed with her sister during this time. There was no way Nicole could go back to that house knowing Michael was still out there, knowing he could come back. She barely slept those 3 days. When she did sleep, she had nightmares about Michael watching her from above, his eyes peering through that vent. On the 3rd day, September 29th, police got a tip from a convenience store clerk about 40 miles outside Charlotte. A man matching Michael's description had come in looking disheveled and paranoid, buying food and asking to use the phone. The clerk had recognized him from the news reports. Police responded immediately. They found Michael walking along a rural road, looking exhausted and disoriented. He didn't resist arrest. In fact, he seemed almost relieved that it was over. During interrogation, Michael gave a confession that was both detailed and chilling. He admitted to breaking into Nicole's house in mid-September, admitted to living in her attic for approximately 16 days, admitted to watching her through the altered vent. He described her daily routines in disturbing detail: what time she woke up, what she wore to bed, conversations he'd overheard between her and her children. When asked why he'd done it, Michael's answer was simple and delusional. "I wanted to be close to her again. I wanted to be part of her life." He didn't seem to grasp that what he'd done was a crime. In his twisted logic, he was just trying to reconnect with someone he loved. He genuinely seemed confused about why everyone was so upset. Detectives asked about the security footage from the neighborhood. Remember that footage from the pre-intro showing the attic vent moving at 2:47 a.m.? One of Nicole's neighbors had a home security camera system that captured the side of Nicole's house. When police reviewed weeks of footage, they found multiple instances of the attic vent moving at odd hours, particularly late at night. You could sometimes see shadows behind the vent slats. That footage, combined with Michael's confession and the physical evidence from the attic, built an ironclad case against him. But the investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Police discovered that this wasn't the first time Michael had done something like this. In 2008, a woman in a neighboring county had reported someone breaking into her home and living in her crawl space for several days before being discovered. That case had never been solved, but when detectives showed the woman Michael's photo, she positively identified him as someone who'd briefly dated her friend and had become obsessed. Michael had done this before. He had a pattern of stalking women, becoming fixated on them, and then finding ways to invade their homes and spy on them. How many other victims were there? How many women had Michael stalked over the years without being caught? The prosecutor's office began building their case. They charged Michael with multiple felonies: burglary, stalking, criminal trespass, violating a restraining order, and invasion of privacy. The DA considered additional charges related to the previous case, but focused on the charges they could prove conclusively. The trial of Michael Stevens began in the spring of 2016 and lasted 2 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution presented photos of Michael's living space in the attic, the altered vent, the supplies he'd brought. They played portions of his confession. They showed the security footage from the neighbor's camera, capturing movement in the attic vents at night. Nicole took the stand and gave testimony that brought many in the courtroom to tears. She described the violation she felt, the loss of security and peace in her own home. She talked about her children's trauma, how her youngest kids were afraid of their own house, how Tyler had nightmares about the man in the attic reaching down through the ceiling. "He stole my sense of safety," Nicole said. "He stole my privacy. He made my home, the place where I should feel most secure, into a place of fear. Even now, months later, I can't be in a room without checking the ceiling. My children can't sleep without nightlights. We hear normal house sounds and panic." Michael's defense attempted to argue that he had mental health issues, that he wasn't fully responsible for his actions due to his obsessive disorder. They brought in a psychiatrist who testified about erotomania, a delusional disorder where someone believes another person is in love with them. But the prosecution countered that Michael's actions showed clear planning and awareness. He knew what he was doing was wrong. That's why he hid. That's why he ran when discovered. That's why he tried to avoid being caught. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing, Nicole read an impact statement directly to Michael. She told him that he'd not only violated her, but had traumatized her 5 children. She told him that she'd moved to a new house, installed extensive security systems, but still didn't feel safe. She told him that what he'd done would affect her family for years to come. Michael showed little emotion during her statement. He maintained his delusion that he'd just been trying to be close to the woman he loved. The case led to significant changes in how stalking cases are handled in North Carolina. Nicole became an advocate for stalking victims, working with legislators to strengthen laws and improve victim protections. She pushed for better tracking of restraining orders and mandatory psychological evaluation for convicted stalkers. She also became vocal about home security, encouraging people, especially women living alone or with children, to regularly check their attics, basements, and other hidden spaces in their homes. "Trust your instincts," she said in interviews. "If something feels wrong, investigate." Don't dismiss those feelings. Nicole's children underwent extensive therapy. It took years for them to feel safe again. Tyler, who'd discovered Michael in the attic, struggled with anxiety and had trouble sleeping for months. But with support, the family slowly healed. They never went back to that house. Nicole sold it and moved to a different neighborhood, starting fresh in a place that didn't have those horrible memories attached to it. Michael Stevens was convicted on the following charges: first-degree burglary, felony stalking, criminal trespass, multiple counts of invasion of privacy, and violation of a protective order. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the burglary, with consecutive sentences on the remaining charges totaling an additional 8 years. He will serve a minimum of 20 years before being eligible for parole, at which time he will be 61 years old. Upon release, he will be required to register as a violent offender and will have a lifetime restraining order preventing him from contacting Nicole or her children. Nicole Patterson and her children deserve to feel safe in their own home. They deserved privacy, security, and peace. Michael Stevens stole that from them in one of the most invasive and disturbing ways imaginable. But Nicole refused to be a victim. She took back her power, her voice, and her sense of safety. She protected her children and rebuilt their lives. And she made sure that what happened to her would help protect other potential victims. Sometimes the worst nightmares are real. Sometimes the person you need to fear is someone from your past who never let go. But survivors like Nicole prove that even after the most horrifying violations, healing is possible, strength is possible, and justice is possible.